When you think of a remake in Pokemon, what comes to mind? New locations, a more polished experience, more content, adding to the experience with the new gimmick of the generation, redesigning a game to appeal to a different audience. Well, that's where Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl come into play, and our topic of today. As the 19th installment to the mainline series, these games set out to be a faithful remake of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and of course, that somehow led to controversy despite these games being the community's most anticipated game since the inception of the series. So it had to have been great, right? Well, other than abnormally high expectations and being nostalgia blind, these games are very lacking. But as usual today, we'll be looking at these games in the critical spotlight as we do another review but covering these new games. But without further ado, your timestamps are on screen, you're hitting that subscribe button, here's your spoiler warning despite these being faithful remakes of an old game, and now let's begin. The best and fastest section to cover first will be the story, and why this is the case is very simple. It's because it wasn't changed from the originals at all. Everything from the original game's story is intact, from all the Team Galactic stuff to the post-game and your rival. The narrative structure is literally the same nonsense of, oh hey, Team Galactic is doing a bad, I gotta stop it. That full scenario that involves you fighting one of the two legendaries. Now you could be asking, what about the changes from Pokemon Platinum? Well, bad news Buttercup, none of it made it into the game. Okay, that's technically not true. Only one thing from Platinum is in these games, and that's the stuff with the Rotom appliances, which isn't even important to the narrative at all, just the lore. But considering this is the only thing returning from Platinum, this also means Looker and Charon just don't exist at all. But on the bright side, your rival no longer says daddy! But as far as story stuff goes, that's all there is. Every single story piece is one-to-one, just like the originals. So now that the story has had zero improvements, you'd be asking yourself, man, did they screw up this game's progression by not using any of Platinum's fixes or just adjusting them in general? Well, let's discuss the gameplay changes and see if the horrible progression's been tweaked at all, much less improved. So let's talk about the main game playthrough and just the game as a whole. So the big elephant in the room consists of an issue being abolished since Generation 7, being the HMs, as they've always been a major part of navigating the region and limiting the game's progression. And thankfully this time around, HMs were adjusted to not be an issue. Now on one hand, the HMs are still required as they're blocking off the field and work in that same regard that they used to. Similarly, each HM is unlocked in the same place you find their TM in the overworld. But there's a catch here, and that is that you don't have to have a Pokemon in your party know these HMs to use them in the overworld. Sadly, there's an issue that arises with this TM-HM change, but we'll talk about this later. Other than that big change in navigation, we have to talk about the movement. So as this is a game to release after Generation 7, these games are no longer using grid movement, but the map itself is still laid out as if it were. But the issue here is your ability to move in more than 4 directions at any point, because your freedom of movement can physically break the game. For example, you could be ignoring the entire puzzle in the Snowpoint City gym, but this is potentially a bug that we'll talk about at the end of the video. In general, the game no longer being forced with the grid movement is capable of causing some minor issues, like being able to stop in between certain bike ramps, the minor inconvenience of being able to move half tiles, or again, any of the glitches I'll talk about at the end of the video. So actually being able to move is nice, right? Well, no. Another issue with the movement is the collision. Let's look at the ledges. You have to be holding directly down to hop down a ledge, not holding down while holding in another direction. It just feels so wrong. However, knowing this in advance can be nice to know, specifically looking at the paths to Spear Pillar and Stark Mountain. Now, other collision issues involve stuff like signs being larger than they seem, or trying to bike past moving trainers and just being pushed off to the side of them. However, the biggest movement sin is obviously the collision issues in the underground hideaways, a new feature added with the minor overhaul to the underground that I will mention later. So to make this short, the collision in these areas are all kinds of messed up, as these areas have 3D walls and set pieces, so they should be better, right? Absolutely not. Somehow, if you even walk by a wall, you seemingly always get stuck on the wall, which is bad when you have overworld encounters just following you and forcing you in the battle. Honestly, I have no idea how they screwed up the movement this badly, but I suppose on the topic of movement, we can speak speak, on the bike. While this is very similar to its old self, once again, this is very glitchy. Regardless of movement, the bike isn't like it was in Sword and Shield, where you could ride it across the water, so the reasons to use it drop drastically. Same could apply to the bike customization. While actually existing this time, there's only 4 color options. Anyways, enough of the awfulness that is the movement, let's talk about Sinnoh and its very little changes. Up first to mention is like the story. Most of Diamond and Pearl's region layout is intact, so this removes all of Platinum's changes. So the HMs, as previously mentioned, are back in their terrible positions from Diamond and Pearl. So of course, getting strength is obnoxious once again. The distortion world is no longer a thing, and all the minor tweaks to the map from Platinum are thrown out, such as the adjustments to the resort area or Acuity Lakefront. These just no longer exist anymore, and as a result, the areas are all one-to-one with their versions of from Diamond and Pearl. But the whole game is like this. Everything just seems to be one-to-one, including the fog and swamp areas that will trap you. This is obviously being too faithful to where it kills the game. So the only locations from Diamond and Pearl to be different is the underground. Elsewise, it's all the same with the exception of the addition of Ramanas Park. This I will touch on soon. So what else is there? The post-game has to be unlocked again via seeing everything in the regional Pokédex, which again is a nightmare to unlock since you're stuck battling every single optional trainer just to find the one trainer that has a Burmy, Mothim, Wormadam, or a Drifloon. And this is just a small example. But like with the past 3 Sinnoh games, this is only a chore to inflate the game time. But on the topic of the Pokédex, once again, there were only 150 Pokemon in the regional dex. But this time there's a catch, as the Grand Underground allows you to catch additional Pokemon not native to Sinnoh. So while the 150 Pokédex is a carbon copy of the Pokédex from Diamond and Pearl, these additional Pokemon make obtaining a few of them just easier, while on the other hand, adding options from Platinum's regional Pokédex to fix how horrendous the Diamond and Pearl version was. But again, this isn't even all of Platinum's Pokemon. So for example, Pokemon like Tangela straight up are not obtainable. But for those obtainable underground, not even all of them are able to be evolved fully. For example, Pokemon like Dusknoir, Rhyperior, and Gliscor, despite having their pre-evolutions obtainable during the main story, cannot be evolved until the post-game. So why on earth are you even going to use these Pokemon when they can't even reach their potential? Since an item like the Eviolite isn't even in the game, because fun fact, most items added since Generation 4 have been completely removed from the game. In fact, the only items to be kept were items such as the Bottle Cap, the Nature Mints, the Ability Capsule, the Ability Patch, and finally the Rotom Catalog. Okay, back on the track of Pokemon, despite the fact that the game added new Pokemon to be attainable during the main story, somehow they decided in an act to remain faithful. Every single trainer has the exact same Pokemon on their teams. Which of course this means you are the only one who's going to have the Pokemon from the underground. Now sure, the items, abilities, and movesets may be different, but that doesn't dismiss the fact that the Pokemon on some teams are terrible again. Just reference my video on Diamond and Pearl if you want the Gym Leader in Elite 4 rant, but again. But of course, as I've just mentioned, the Pokemon themselves have gotten some overhauls. However, of course, the Gym Leaders in Elite 4 specifically have it off significantly better, as their Pokemon have a cracked amount of EVs and IVs on their Pokemon with beneficial natures that can rapidly increase the difficulty when otherwise slow Pokemon can outspeed your entire team. But that reminds me of the fact I haven't talked about the difficulty of these games, which, fun fact, are harder than quite a lot of the games in the series. Now some smooth brain might be typing in the comments that the EXP share is on by default and can't be turned off. Well, it's crazy how the EXP share, which was copied from Sword and Shield, doesn't even break these games' difficulty. In fact, all it does is drastically improve the game, because now you aren't wasting your entire lifetime trying to grind through this terrible level curve, which again, like everything but the PAL part from Diamond and Pearl, is completely intact. Since of course overleveling isn't an issue since nothing really gives enough XP anyways. Now, if we're talking difficulty breaking, the only example of this is the merger of the friendship mechanic from all games since Gold and Silver with the affection mechanic from X and Y onwards. Since now, all the bonuses like being able to survive lethal attacks, removing status conditions, or just the extra EXP gain is now forced on the player via a merged mechanic. This was a mistake. So not only does it balance the difficulty increase in your favor, it's also just really slow. Off the topic of Pokemon, trainer customization, despite being limited, is returning from most games since Gen 6. however this time being restricted to a very few amount of outfits that aren't customizable. The Pokemon following you mechanic is back, and just like in Sword and Shield, does absolutely nothing. But most importantly, the TM and HM change. So you remember how since Black and White we've had unlimited use TMs, and that change was awesome and a long time coming? Just for Sun and Moon to remove the HMs, which were a drastically outdated mechanic, also improving the game. Then how Sword and Shield decided we need both limited and unlimited use TMs. Well, bad news Buttercup, for some dumb reason, they went back to the limited use TMs only, despite the fact they knew it would hurt the games. Even the last two sets of remakes that didn't initially have unlimited use TMs still adapted to the modern changes. The simple fact that we're back to 100 limited use TMs is dumbfound, which is also irritating since former HMs like Surf are also limited, so you can't just slap them on everything. Just like the last remakes, the new mechanical stuff is here. So stuff like the Gen 8 speed changes and the fairy typing, but this isn't gonna sell the game. Other than that, the Pokétch got moved since there's no longer a second screen. Otherwise, it functions identically to the originals despite missing a few apps, while also being the menu for your HMs. The DS sounds exists as a key item to mirror the GB sounds from Heart Gold and Soul Silver. There's also a nice new gameplay addition, and this is the save data backup. So basically pressing up B and X on the main menu will allow you to access the save data backup, which is your previous save file prior to your current save. Thank goodness this exists, because if it didn't, the sheer amount of soft locks you can get stuck in would easily kill your save file. This makes for a nice last line of defense, especially when autosave could easily stick your save file in a bad spot. Thankfully, like in Sword and Shield, this can at least be turned off. Also, like the other games on the Switch, multiple save files can be held on one cartridge thanks to the multiple save files your Switch can hold. But on the topic of changes in the last two games, you can access the PC from anywhere once again. But here we are, at the end of the gameplay refinements and changes. So something I forgot to mention earlier was the actual Pokemon that you can use in these games. So again, to remain faithful, the only Pokemon allowed to be transferred into these games and or caught in these games period are the original 493 Pokemon that were available during Generation 4. None of their regional variants, no Mega Evolution, none of that nonsense. But of course, once again, they are all obtainable within these games under some means. Here we see what happens when trying to remain faithful takes priority above all else. A game with a handful of gives and equally as many takes. But now, it's time to talk about the endgame content. So as I hinted at earlier when I said most things from the original games were intact, let's start with the new one, Ramenas Park. This location filled in for the removal of Hell Park. Basically, this place serves as a location to get all the legendary Pokemon not native to Sinnoh. Yes, this list actually includes the Regi Trio, so getting Regigigas is actually possible this time around without trading or transferring. But with all good things, there is a catch. To actually summon the legendary Pokemon, you need a specific slate item to summon them. The problem here is the only way you're getting the items to exchange for these in the first place is through the Grand Underground, which in the next segue I'll go into more depth with. But the issue here is you're going on a detour to fetch items that are not only rare, but you still aren't guaranteed to get them when they appear. The Underground is basically like the Dynamax dens in Sword and Shield. The game basically just begs you to do the cool new thing, but it's time to talk on the Grand Underground's overhaul. Starting with what hasn't been changed is the mining minigame, if you can call it that. Basically, it's the exact same minus the touchscreen controls. Moving back to the tunnels, the traps that were natively found in the tunnels have been removed, and also the traps you could buy are completely gone. This mechanic is removed entirely. Another thing that's been completely removed is the pointless inventory that your treasure got sent to before you were supposed to send it to the bag. Now this no longer exists, removing pointless menuing and basically not cock-blocking you from getting more items by capping them for some arbitrary reason. Your secret bases also get a major change, but for the worse. First off, basic decoration is no more. So, no more personalization and a feature that was built from the ground up in Ruby and Sapphire for personalization. Instead, now, there's a statue system, which only exists to increase the encounter rate of wild Pokemon of the boosted type in the Underground. Now, as I mentioned earlier with the Pokédex, I did talk about the Underground hideaways briefly. These exist to make some more Pokemon be obtainable earlier in the game, such as Munchlax, while also allowing you to encounter Pokemon outside the regional Pokédex. And this list exists as you proceed throughout the game and or obtain the National Pokédex, allowing you to get even more Pokemon, like all 4 sets of the starter Pokemon. But as I also mentioned earlier with the movement collision and the walls being horrendous, the Pokemon down here also have horrendous collision, because fun fact, the Pokemon down here are contact encounters rather than the random encounters that you find everywhere else in the game. going back up to the main part of the region, let's get the annoying one out of the way. The Battle Tower. It's the same 7 unoriginal battles in a row that we've had since Pokemon Crystal. Continuing on to content that's just an insult to its players, we have the neutered contests. So to start, the dress-up competition has been cut completely. So as a result, the first round contests have been changed and no longer use the dress-up feature, but instead use the ball capsules. Round 3 was scrapped entirely, and round 2 is completely different. Now, you just press the A button when it appears as if you're playing Donkey Konga. Adding on, you only get to use one of your Pokemon's attacks now, so of course customization means absolutely nothing. But the most important returning feature was something that actually existed in Pokemon Platinum, which is the Gym Leader and Elite Four rematches, which of course have drastically better teams, which make for good in-game content. While each Gym Leader rematch is the same as they were in Let's Go, which can be rebattled daily just by going to their gym, the Elite Four teams are also improved, and it's just the same as they were in Fire Red and Leaf Green. You get the National Pokedex, you go back and fight their improved teams, and in the case of the Elite Four, they also get a second improvement. Of course, stuff like the Pokeradar still exists, but are you really gonna bother with this? The GTS and Wonder Trade are seemingly absent from the game. Sure, Wonder Trade's returning in a later patch, but honestly, even with these features, the games aren't going to get the saving grace that they need. Anyways, now that the in-game content is bad, and the actual post-game story for Heatran is still bad and purposeless, there's actively nothing to do in these games once the main story is completed. It's like they managed to drain the souls out of the games, because of course modern gaming would have another victim. But speaking of modern gaming, that brings us to our last section, the bugs and glitches. So as a disclaimer, as I was working on this video, an update dropped on these games literally the night before recording the audio. This of course is version 1.12. So now, a lot of the game's bugs have been patched out. Now, why this is the case is obvious. These games released as a buggy mess. Now, I say this as I initially had a whole rant in this section about the bugs, but as this new update came out, I was half tempted to scrap the whole thing. But there's a problem, as since updates aren't automatically applied to the game when you buy the cartridge, so, for the people who do not have internet, they will probably never get to play this patched version of the game. So, in memorial to those players who don't get to play the new versions of the game that are probably bug-free, and to the glitch speedrun community, I'm just going to do a speedrun of my own, as I name off every glitch that these games launched with that are perhaps no longer existing. But up first, a high number of soft locks, one easily can be obtained from the underground, the Snowpoint City Gym skip, if you can even count that as a glitch, Pokemon duplication, relearning attacks to Pokemon from another Pokemon's learn set, the Void glitch, more stuff with the Bad Egg, clipping out of bounds on foot or with the bike, land surfing, and the final one I'll mention being menu sandwiching. You know, the one that broke the speedrun down to nearly 20 minutes. Listen man, just go to YouTube to see an archive of this stuff, it's a treat. Anyways, I've babbled on for long enough. Let's close these games out so I never have to talk about Sinnoh again. We're just going straight to the point this time. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are not great games. They were made as faithful remakes of a set of D-tier games, so they were doomed from the start. At its best, it's a nice distraction for your first playthrough, but that's all. The sheer lack of content, once again, backed by the $60 price tag, isn't doing the game any favors. Thankfully, these games are good modernizations of the games that they were built to be exactly like, with their improvements. The graphics just look bizarre at times, with jarring transitions between the in and out of battle transitions, as well as the chibi models just standing there looking like bobbleheads. But all around, I have to say, if you have Pokemon Platinum, do not invest in these games. It's actively a downgrade. And if you have Diamond and Pearl, you might not even want to consider. But of course, for those who haven't even played any of the Sinnoh games, this might be your best bet, considering it's better than Diamond and Pearl, yet cheaper than what you'll find Platinum for. My final score for Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is a 3.9 out of 10. If you've played Sinnoh before, you'll be playing another lacking version of it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this far. Leave a like and subscribe or whatever. I just want to thank you for this ride that 2021 has been. I'm here to tell you that this will be the last review style content for the year, and we'll be back in January with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. However, the next video is our December Q&A video. So if you want in, drop a comment down below in the comment section before December 27th, and I'll do my best to include it. Peace out, you alpha males, and I'll see you guys in the next one.